Hi, this is Stephen from Own or Disown. Today I'm reviewing the Gigabyte Aorus 17XE4. Now this costs $2,450 from Newegg. Now under the hood we have an i7 12700H CPU with 14 cores and 20 threads, a max 130 watt RTX 3070 Ti, a blazing fast 1TB SSD and dual channel 16GB DDR4 3200 MHz RAM. Now it's a slim 17.3 inch gaming laptop with a great 360Hz 1080p panel, with very thin 3mm bezels and a whopping 90% screen to body ratio. Seriously, this laptop is all screen, and finally they did move the webcam up top. So we've got a 720p webcam, and at least they have moved it from the bottom up the top, but there's only 720p when competing models are using 1080p now. And this is what it's like when you're typing, and when you activate the max fan, here it does ramp up quite a bit, but then it does settle down a little bit, but you can still hear that background noise. So the underside is actually made out of plastic, and the first thing you'll notice is the large air intake here, which I do like because the feet themselves actually aren't all that high. But to be fair, the cooling is pretty decent. Now to get inside you do have Torx 6 screws, so it's fairly easy to get off. And once you're inside, you've got the 99 watt hour battery, which got me 4 hours 40 minutes of runtime at 50% brightness. You do have two M.2 slots, one of them was occupied with a 1TB, and it's very fast, good fast read and write speeds. You have 2 sticks of RAM, 8GB, DDR4 3200 MHz. Now you can configure it up to, or even put DDR5 in there should you wish, and I will do a separate video comparing the difference in speeds there. And we do have a Wi-Fi 6E AX211 Wi-Fi card. Good to see the CMOS battery here. 3070 Ti is here, and the 12700H is here. We do have a total of 4 heat pipes with a separate one for the GPU, and we've got 4 heat sinks altogether. I noticed that you do have tamper evident screws here, so they certainly don't want you going in for doing any repasting. Now the speakers, the 2.5 watt speakers, and the stereo here at the sides firing underneath. The speakers are pretty decent actually. They're actually quite loud at 77 decibels. I would say that average laptop speakers are about 72. And if you're into real-time audio, unfortunately it did fail my latency mon test. I do like the lid, it's nice and clean looking. You do have the glowing Aorus emblem here, which can't be turned off. Now this does seem to be made of plastic, but you know, that being said, it is still fairly rigid. Alright, so the keyboard deck is quite nice, clean looking actually. Just a few small stickers here, and I do believe it's made out of metal. Doesn't seem to show too much in the way of smudges, although the micro precision touchpad does, as you can see here. Now it is 25% larger than previous, and also seemingly it's also less susceptible for any accidental touches. Now I do like the keyboard. The keys feel very nice to me to type on. You do have a separate number pad, and you do have per key RGB. Now the only problem is the secondary function keys do not light up, which is a shame, but they are plenty bright, and of course in the software you can configure different patterns. Nice big power button up here at the top, and across here above the keyboard are some air intakes, which I like to see on more laptops. The hinges themselves are nice and stiff as well. So here on the left hand side we've got the RJ45, HDMI 2.1, we've got a mini DisplayPort 1.4, and a USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port. On the right hand side we've got the combo headphone mic jack, USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A port, Thunderbolt 4 port, and in the center here we have the barrel power port. Now I don't like the placement of this particularly because of course, you know, and also the USB port, I'd rather that was at the back, or the power port at the back or the left hand side, because you do tend to can block up your mouse hand here with all the cables coming out. Also you've got a danger if your power cable is, perhaps like my case, under the desk and it comes out this way, it blocks off this port as well. Now around the back here you do have two air exhausts. I do like the aesthetics of this sort of copper rib here at the back, but there is space for that power port here, and I do wish it was there. So I've got the Aorus 17 on top of the Omen 15 and the Omen 16 Advantage. As you can see, there's not a lot between them, to be honest. Looking at 27mm thick, or they're just over an inch. Now granted, you can get perhaps like the GS76, which could be a little bit thinner, but you can get thicker laptops too. And I think for the power that's in this, it's pretty decent, and it's certainly pretty lightweight as well, making it quite a good portable package. So from left to right, we've got the Omen 15 with its 200 watt brick, the Omen 16 Advantage with its 230 watt brick, and finally there on the right, the Aorus 17 with its 240 watt brick. And I think, as you can confirm, the brick actually on the Aorus 17 is actually fairly small, and the difference in the size of the laptops aren't that great. So yep, definitely, it's if you're looking for a laptop that's fairly portable, I think the Aorus 17 is quite good. So on the left is the Aorus 17, and on the right is the Lenovo Legion 7 with a 16-inch panel. And as you can see, actually there's not much difference in size really between the 17-inch and the 16-inch. And I do prefer the Aorus 17, believe it or not. Actually, I do quite like, it's slim but wider. It does look good in terms of color gamut. It's very similar to the Legion 7. We're talking about 92% of sRGB. The Aorus is peak brightness is 331 nits compared to the Legion 7, which is a bit brighter, about 396 nits there. But all in all, actually, I do think the Aorus 7 does look slightly nicer. I do like it. And of course, you can alter the different color temperatures. This is on native setting. Now, as for backlight bleed, I don't see any at all. Now, ghosting performance was very good by virtue of its fast 360Hz refresh rate and fast 3 millisecond response time. The Gigabyte Control Center has an AI boost option which uses cloud information to help optimize your gaming performance. And I'll show you in a bit how that gets on. You can choose one of 6 power modes. Creator and Turbo modes have a PL1 of 70 watts, Gaming mode drops that down to 55 watts, and Meeting and Silence modes are 15 watts. Now the latter two modes are great if you want no fan noise. Doing everyday tasks and even doing work that stresses the CPU, the fans never came on, even when the 12700H reached 53 degrees Celsius. Although the CPU is no slouch, I do feel that they had enough thermal headroom to push it further. Here are the clock rates for both the performance and efficiency cores, as well as the thermals for the power modes whilst doing a handbrake encode. At 70 watts, the 12700H with auto fan is only at 74 degrees. Now activating the max fan in turbo mode, this brings it down to 66 degrees, which is matched with auto fan at 55 watts. So yeah, I do feel even if they increase the PL1 to say 80 or even 85 watts in turbo mode, I think it does have the cooling chops to handle it. Now it is interesting, when you switch to meeting mode with a PL1 of 15 watts, the efficiency cores, shown by the yellow bars here, take the lead and handle the work. So, using turbo mode, the 12700H was still plenty fast, doing the encode 9% quicker than the Ryzen 7 5800H. But bear in mind, the 12700H can handle 25% more threads, so one would expect the difference to be greater. In Cinebench R23, we see a good score of 1755, with the i9 12900H being 5% faster. Still, for 1080p gaming, I think this CPU will be very good. Its single core performance is 32% faster than the 5800H. Now I've seen multi-core scores with the 12900H in the 18,000s, so yeah, 14,209 is a little underwhelming, and I suspect this is purely down to the lower 70 watt PL1. In other CPU tests, it is definitely an upgrade over the 11th gen 11800H, and if you are looking for a gaming laptop today, I think it does make sense to go for one with the 12th gen Intel CPU. Now my only reservation is that Ryzen still does give you better battery life. For gaming, you can also choose to have no dynamic boost, you can use Nvidia's dynamic boost, or even use gigabytes. In TimeSpy, the Aorus 17 is shown by the yellow and the blue bars. Gigabyte's dynamic boost didn't have any effect on the GPU score, but it did reduce the CPU performance quite dramatically. Perhaps we will see some benefit in actual gameplay, and I can test that if you like, but based on what I see here, I would stick with Nvidia's dynamic boost. A GPU score of 10,511 is 3% slower than a 140 watt 3070 in hybrid mode. But it's the CPU score that is impressive. Even compared to the i7 11800H in the GP66, it was 12% faster. The dashboard shows you fan speed and CPU or GPU utilization, as well as temperature, as well as change to what percentage the laptop charges to. You can actually choose anywhere from 1 to 100%, and I much prefer this over laptops that say just give you one option, say like 65%. Gigabyte also gives you very good control of your fans. You can choose one of 5 fan profiles, which can be chosen by pressing the FN and escape key. Although you can't control the CPU and the GPU fan separately, you can actually create your own fan curve or have the fan set to a fixed RPM. Now, earlier I mentioned Gigabyte's AI option in the software. I actually do think they may be one of the first to implement this a few years ago, so one would expect it to be pretty well fine-tuned by now. Now note, when you activate the AI mode, game mode is automatically selected. You cannot choose turbo mode to run with it. The AI makes no difference in Watch Dogs Legion, and meeting mode is playable at low settings. Compared to the 140 watt 3070 in dedicated GPU mode, it was slightly behind, but was 13% faster in hybrid mode. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I compare it against the turbo mode as shown by the yellow bars. I saw exactly the same frame rate, which was slightly behind the 140 watt 3070 in dedicated GPU mode, but was 8% faster when that was in hybrid mode. Here is Assassin's Creed Valhalla, 1080p using ultra settings. The AI game mode was about the same as regular game mode. Performance in this title, which is quite GPU dependent, was pretty good, even beating the 140 watt RTX 3080 that was in dedicated GPU mode. If you want to play with low fan noise, then meeting mode is playable using medium settings. Here I show you the same scene in Far Cry 6. Turbo mode with max fan at the top, then we have creator mode, game mode, and finally meeting mode. Now, I captured this footage using an external monitor as shown by the iGPU usage being 0. I thought this would be useful because you can see not only the thermals and the power of the RTX 3070Ti and the 12700H, but also the variance in clock rate between the 12700H's performance cores and the efficiency cores. I think game mode is the way to go. It doesn't get too hot, nor does it get too loud. Here I show the difference in frame rate when you bypass the iGPU using an external monitor, which sees a 5% boost. Now this will vary from game to game, but it does show that Gigabyte should really have included a muck switch. Still, it matches or slightly beats the 140 watt 3080 that is in dedicated GPU mode, thanks to the higher performing CPU, because Far Cry 6 is quite CPU dependent. Here I compare the RTX 3070Ti clock rates, clock speeds and power between Far Cry 6 and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I picked these two because the former likes a fast CPU and the latter likes a fast GPU. Now this is shown by the higher watts in Valhalla. Look at turbo and game mode, which sees 14% more watts to the GPU and a 10% higher clock rate. There was no thermal throttling. The max GPU temperature was 83 degrees, so still well below Nvidia's limit of 87 degrees. Fan noise in creator and turbo modes does get quite loud, but it's not distracting at all. There's no whining, there's no rattling, and there's no pulsing. Game mode at 51 decibels is okay. And of course, you can adjust the fans via the software. I also show the same thing from the perspective of the 12700H CPU. The first thing that strikes me is the wattage and the thermals in creator mode. Even though it has the same power limits as turbo mode, you do see the CPU using more watts, suggesting that dynamic boost isn't working in the same way, if at all. The difference between the blue bars, which is Assassin's Creed, and the yellow bars with Far Cry 6 shows that when CPU performance isn't as important as in Assassin's Creed, dynamic boost moves the power from the CPU to the GPU, as shown in the GPU chart. Less watts means lower clock rate and lower temperatures. Conversely, if you lower the settings or the resolution, the shift in power will be in reverse. Look again at meeting mode at the bottom. With the CPU being worked more in Far Cry 6, the performance cores were at 996 MHz, but switch to a game that uses more GPU, then their performance cores merely just idle, and most of the work is done by the efficiency cores. and this could well bode well for gaming on battery. The chassis temperatures are very good. You see cool air being brought in via the keyboard, as well as those intakes above the keyboard. The fans are doing a great job at moving the air out of the chassis. Underneath it may look hot, but that's mainly the heat pipes. To the touch it didn't feel hot at all. So what do I think of the 2022 Aorus 17? Well, on the whole I must say I do like it. Gigabyte has to be given credit for making a laptop with such slim bezels and giving us a usable webcam. It does make for a smaller laptop that is very portable. I found the speakers are good and the fans are not annoying, and you can customize them as you see fit. The keyboard is pretty good as well, but they definitely did drop the ball by not having those secondary functions not lit up. Build quality is also good, even though it seems that the only metal part is actually on the keyboard deck itself. Now the chassis and the hinges were nice and stiff, and I also thought the thermals were good. I just wish they had been less conservative and had a higher PL1 in turbo mode. You know, I do think it could handle it, so hopefully they will release a BIOS update and to give us that. Now the only other thing that I would have liked, is a mux switch. Now, it is their gaming line after all, and I can understand, being a creator, not having it in perhaps the Aero model, but not having it in the Aorus. It is a shame, and I understand, a lot of people want to squeeze out the max frame rate that they possibly can, and Optimus will hold it back. On the whole, they perform similar to a 140W 3070 in dedicated GPU mode, in GPU bound games, and faster in titles that like a fast CPU too. Now I would like to do some more game testing on it and compare it to incoming machines I have from Alienware, MSI and Razer, so make sure you're subscribed to catch those videos. Thank you for watching, bye now.